Your organisation runs training courses for your staff and customers. Only problem is it's time-consuming, inconvenient and costly. Take a leaf out of our book. The School of Hard Knock Knocks uses the online training platform by YZ, and our team and customers love it. It's simple to use, supports every media format, audio, video, text, and looks great on desktops, tablets and mobiles. And for a limited time, quote SHKK when you arrange a demo and get 10% off your first year's plan. YZ helps us deliver comedy courses around the world. Imagine what it could do for your organisation. YZ, that's WYZED.com. YZ, online learning made simple. You're listening to the School of Hard Knock Knocks podcast with me, Maury Morgan.
Ladies and gentlemen, your next comedian.
Shouldn't drink on an empty head, you know that, don't you?
That is the shittiest heckle I've ever heard in my life.
Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
What's a bucket list?
You have dangerously underprepared yourself for the shit that is about to get real.
Rik Roberts runs the School of Laughs, but not in Australia. Rik is Kentucky-born and now lives in Nashville, Tennessee, which will explain our two contrasting accents. As you can guess, like the School of Hard Knock Knocks, the School of Laughs is a stand-up comedy school. And that's where the similarities end. Rik, in contrast to just about all of our previous interviewees, identifies as a Christian comedian. In this School of Hard Knock Knocks podcast, you'll hear a unique perspective on finding the funny within the constraints of Christianity and how being squeaky clean can be great for business. Well, at least in the USA. And while I have your attention, the upcoming Melbourne and Adelaide comedy courses are filling up quickly, with guest comedians Joe White, Glenn Nicholas and Greg Fleet. If you're interested in kickstarting your stand-up comedy career or getting your comedy set polished from seasoned comedians, then be sure to sign up for our August and September courses. Or you can still get the early bird price. And who doesn't like a discount? Amen. And now, here's my interview with the School of Laughs, Rik Roberts.
Parents' first time on a computer was this past Christmas. We got them on with a little camera so they can Skype, see their grandkids anytime they want. That's what they're supposed to use it for. Yeah, I get back home to Tennessee, my dad calls me up on the regular phone. He's like, Richard Dale, I'm about to fire off an email. Keep an eye out for it. I'm like, I will, and just so you know, you don't have to call people right before you send them an email. If you're going to text me later, how about a smoke signal? That'd be good. Maybe two, it's windy. So I go check my inbox. I can't believe my dad figured out how to set up email. But the email in there isn't coming directly from him. It's asking me if I would like to follow him on Twitter. This isn't good for me, my dad, or Twitter, y'all. Y'all think Donald Trump's crazy on Twitter. Wait till you see what my dad's got. So I thought, okay, he's only had the computer for a couple of days. Probably just set up a Twitter feed. Let's go check it out. Well, I log on there. In 2 days, how many tweets do you think a normal person would put out in 2 days? How many would y'all put out in 2 days? Four. Yeah, that's good. Couple a day. 116 tweets. All capital letters. No punctuation. Just running on like the Unabomber's manifesto. And 0 followers. I'm like, he's just tweeting in the breeze. I'm like, I can't believe, where did my dad get 116 thoughts, you know? Not to be rude, but my dad's an old, quiet tobacco farmer. He doesn't say 116 words a week unless he eats out twice and has to order off the menu. So I start thinking maybe this is his way of communicating. This could be good. Maybe he's like Mark Twain on the inside. I didn't know all these years. So I started reading down through the 116 to see what kind of thoughts were going on there. And I figured out after about 10, it wasn't 116 different thoughts. Just one big story broken into 116 pieces. It gets even worse. Whole story was about birds because my dad thought Twitter was a bird watching, updating website. That's my gene pool. I'm lucky I'm walking. I can't believe, if you want to follow my dad on Twitter, please do. He's only got 2 followers. It's me and the Audubon Society. You can find him. It's at Nuthatcher 401-261853, which is also his Social Security number.
Good afternoon, Rik. How are you?
I'm doing great, Maury. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, I forgot to say g'day, so just to prove that I am Australian.
Yeah, we get a little bit of the Crocodile Dundee around here. We get a little bit of the Crocodile Hunter and a little bit of everything. So good day works for me.
Yeah, well, there we go. Good. What's the Nashville greeting on the street?
Well, I think the Nashville greeting is hello, but if people who move to Nashville assume it's howdy or howdy y'all. So
yeah, right.
We always say you can tell the out-of-towners because they're the ones wearing the cowboy hats downtown.
Ah, there we go. So you know perfectly well the stereotype, which of course Crocodile Dundee is an incredible stereotype for Australians. You know, we don't go out back and we don't stab crocodiles and catch snakes in our backyards. Well, some do, but not a lot. So yeah, so you're saying that there's also a stereotype as well that what is it? Just a typical big city, like any big city in the US? Nashville, that is?
Nashville is probably, the general area is about 1.5 million, and it's growing a lot.
Yep.
We're, for example, they're currently building 23 new hotels downtown. That's how big it's growing.
That's good business. So fantastic. Well, before we go into the economics of Nashville, let's talk a little bit more about comedy, because I came across your name mostly because we share some similarities. You run the School of Laughs.
Yes.
Stand-up comedy
yes,
school.
Indeed.
And you've been running it for something between 10 to 15 years, I believe.
When I first moved to Nashville, I lived in a few different places around the United States, but I moved here, and the guy who ran the comedy club, Zanies, in town, asked me if I would teach a class because he was having open mic nights where, new comics or people have never tried it before go up and do some time. And they were so bad, people were leaving the showroom and walking out. And he's like, you got to give them some basics so that they know what they're doing. They're taking 3 minutes to get to a punchline. What's going on here?
Right.
And I responded the way that I think every comic would naturally respond is, I can't teach them anything. It's something you have or you don't have.
Yeah.
And then he challenged me to listen to my show or watch a video, and every time I got a laugh, pause it and write down not only the words that made the audience laugh, but why did they laugh? What was funny about the wording or what have you? And I came up with about 18, 19 different reasons people laugh.
Right.
And I started noticing that my jokes that weren't working good didn't have any of those techniques in there. And so within a year, I went through my entire, all my sets of material, probably a couple hours worth of material, and fine-tuned it with those techniques. And then I started teaching that to the people here that take my class.
Oh, that's fantastic. And that is, just to clarify my geography, that's in Nashville, Tennessee, but you're originally from Kentucky. Is that my understanding?
Yeah, I'm originally from about 3 hours north in Kentucky, the home of horse racing and tobacco and bourbon. Those are the big three exports.
Yeah, excellent. So that accent that we're hearing, is that a typical Kentucky accent, or is it a mix of a few places?
It could be a mix. I went to school in West Virginia, which is kind of up in the mountains, and then I've been here about 18 years. So it's funny, you probably think you sound pretty neutral. I think I sound pretty neutral, but there's probably some twangy nuances that will come out
That's
in
right.
the conversation.
Well, I can tell that you keep name-dropping lyrics from songs that I've heard. West Virginia, and Nashville, Tennessee. And, every time you say a city name, I'm humming a country and western song for some reason.
Yeah, they tend to be geographical, but I guess they're writing songs in between cities.
Yeah.
Not unlike comics write jokes about other cities because they go there and they have the outsider's point of view and make some notes of it.
Well, it does. It did very, on a side note, it did very well for AC/DC, which you may know as a very strong American brand rock and roll band, but actually from Australia, because they came up with a lot of songs with the word Texas in them and lyrics relating to America, which certainly helped with album sales.
Yeah.
And made them feel like one of yours. Anyway, back to comedy. Roughly 15 years running the school, the School of Laughs, but you're a comedian of about, my understanding, 28 years. Is that right?
Yes, I started in 1991. Long story short, I went to a place to play guitar, and it turned out to be a comedy night, and I did not know till I got done playing guitar.
Right. So did you have lyrics that were funny or?
Well, I did 2 songs that were just regular folky type songs, not funny.
Uh-huh.
And, I didn't know it was supposed to be a comedy night. I was the first guy up, and it was at a restaurant. It wasn't at a comedy club. So there were no signs to tell me I was supposed to be funny. But after my two songs went by with no applause and no reaction at all, I said, what do you guys want to hear? And they used a lot of expletives that basically said, how about something funny?
Yep, right.
And so I pulled out a song I'd written in college that was kind of funny and got a few laughs. And then I found out that this is a comedy competition, not only just a comedy night, but I had entered a competition unknowingly.
Wow.
And I kind of got bit by the bug. I watched a bunch of people go up and be funny, and I didn't know that's how comedians work on becoming funny. Like most people, I just thought comedians were always comedians. I didn't know you became one. So it was cool, and I jumped in the scene as quick as I could.
Yep.
And within a year, I went full time.
Fantastic. And in terms of the US, have you traveled a lot doing comedy?
Yes. So we've got the 48 contiguous connected states, and I've been to 46 of those, and I've been to Alaska as well. So 47 out of the 50.
Not yet Hawaii, I'm assuming.
No, that's another one that's on my list, and I've had a couple of opportunities to go, but the timing just wasn't quite right.
Well, when you do decide to go to Hawaii, just keep going, because if you keep going, you'll get to Australia. It's not quite halfway, but it's probably a third.
Yeah.
You might as well just stay on board.
I would love to come all the way down.
Well, as I said, off mic, so to speak, we in Australia, we do love a nice American accent, one that we can understand, that of course, and which yours is very clear. We do like sort of unusual characters, and we'd like to hear different stories. So your stories, obviously you've got to tailor it to an Australian audience. We need to know what the hell you're talking about.
Right.
I'm sure you'll find an audience here, no problem at all. So let's talk a little bit about your comedy career. So you said you accidentally stumbled into comedy, and I'm assuming you didn't win.
No, I here's the funny thing is there was probably almost 20 comedians that night, or 20 people that went up.
Yep.
And at the end of the night, they had us come stand on stage, and they gave us a number, and the audience would put the number that they thought was the funniest in a hat, and then they would count that up. And I beat three people that had been doing it for 2 years or more.
Oh,
and
right.
So that's how bad they were, and I was just barely not as bad. But that was encouraging to me that they knew it was a comedy night, and I didn't. I still did a little bit better than they did.
Oh, that's good. Well, at least 3 people voted for you, or maybe one person voted for you and they got no votes or something.
I almost think some people voted just to see if I would come back again. It was so bad.
The underdog. Very good. And what was the timing between that debut and your first paid gig?
I got lucky in some ways that the guy who actually ran that contest, within about 5 months, he saw me come back every week, and I started going to other clubs and working on some material. And he had this gig at a seafood restaurant, and you had a microphone at the end of the buffet.
Right.
The microphone they would use to announce what food was out on the buffet. Hey, we have fresh tilapia or whatever.
Yeah.
And so you got to be on that microphone. And I remember he came up to me and said, "Hey, Rick, do you want to get paid for this?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "I've got a gig. It pays $1 a minute, but you can't talk longer than 60 minutes because I need the rest of the money."
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, 60 minutes, that's got to be easy. I'd only been doing comedy for a few months." And so I went up there, and after 3 minutes, I was pretty much done with all my good material.
Yeah. And
I just kind of did a lot of crowd work for the rest of the 57 more minutes and got my $60.
And when you say crowd work, was there a cordless microphone or a cable running from the buffet, or did you have to wait for people to come up to you and at the salad bar and do crowd work that way?
There was, the microphone was almost like a CB radio microphone where you kind of push down the button and talk and then let off.
Oh, like in a school sort of TV show where the principal presses the button and talks across the speaker system?
Yeah, like an intercom, just like that. So it was. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was rough going, but the saving grace, I guess, was about halfway through. People were done with their meal, they leave, and you get a fresh batch of people who were staring at you, wondering why you were there.
Yeah, right. Use the same material again. I guess you can discard the ones that don't work, and Yeah. Any references to food as well in that stand-up gig? Yeah, I imagine there would have been.
Yeah, I mean, I found myself just talking about the casseroles and the salads and whatever they were bringing out, and trying to make them sound more appealing than they really were. I got a few laughs that way, but it was a tough gig. I don't know if I can survive it now.
Well, I can imagine, and this sort of moves into my next set of questions, because there you are being paid by the restaurant. Obviously, you've got to say positive things about the food, but wasn't there in the back of your mind, didn't you just want to make jokes about how table 33 is cleared out because there's something wrong with the fish sticks? Or, didn't you want to make references that were negative?
Yeah, there's always a tendency in comedy to go negative, and I think that's natural. That's kind of where the magnet draws you to find. But when you're working in a capacity where you're, if you flip your mindset around to where you're serving the audience, and the restaurant at the same time, then I know most comedians don't like to have boundaries or barriers or any kind of guidelines, but for me, that gave me, however wide or narrow a trajectory to find the material. It helped me kind of zoom in on what I could talk about, and there's lots of gigs that are like that. A lot of the shows here in the U.S., the comedy clubs will put the comedians up in a hotel or a condominium or an apartment complex, and once the comedian takes the stage and makes fun of that hotel or condo or apartment complex, they lose the lease. So there are times where you have to be sort of corporate minded in speaking to keep the gig and to keep the gig going for others. But there's humor everywhere in every little crevice in between. For sure.
Well, I guess it comes down to a mantra that I love, and that is constraint is the mother of invention. Not necessity, but constraint. So you're constrained in not talking badly about the fish sticks, and therefore you have to look at other things that are, out there that you wouldn't normally do. Yeah, gotcha.
Right. And I think the audience too would, they would agree with you probably pretty quickly, but you're not giving them any new information. If we all know the fish sticks or the hotel is lame, then all I'm doing is piling on top of the conversation instead of creating a new one.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. So this moves on to my question. I interviewed a fellow called Chris Wainhouse recently. Now, he's a Kiwi-born, Aussie-raised comedian. He is quite well known in Australia, and he's done quite a bit of work in the UK as well. I don't know if he's done much in the US. So I'm not sure if anyone in sort of the US market would know Chris Wainhouse. But the reason I bring him up was because his recent Melbourne International Comedy Festival performance, his show, and by the way, for the American audience, the Melbourne International Comedy Festival is I think it is actually the largest festival and event in Australia by the number of people who attend. Something like 700,000 people attend shows over the period of March and April, which is bigger than our football, and that football not being American football or rugby, but Aussie rules football. So it's a huge thing. And his show was called The Antichrist. Now, for the Christian audience, obviously recognise Antichrist as being similar to Antichrist, and his show was about his upbringing under a very traditional lady, a Kiwi-born, New Zealand-born lady who was and it still is, I believe, I think she's still alive, a creationist, so a Christian who believes in the finite definitions of what's written in the Bible, so literally everything. And we got into a conversation about that because Australia, by the way, is not a very religious country anymore, used to be, but things have changed over the last 100 years. And I understand, Rik, that you identify as a Christian comedian. Is that my understanding?
Yeah, and I'm trying to be really easy and clear on, I'm raised a Christian, I am a Christian. I do comedy shows in churches, but I primarily am, in corporate entertainment and as well as comedy clubs. So in the U.S., I think we even define it more as you're a church comic, which is a comic who primarily and mostly does churches with church-based material, We have clean
Right.
comedians is where I kind of am, but I'm a Christian, so any audience I perform for, I treat them with respect and grace and try to, serve them with the comedy as opposed to beat anybody up. So
Okay.
in my corporate comedy, I wouldn't be up there necessarily, referencing Bible verses
Right,
and those
right.
kinds of things. But, day to day in and out, I'm a Christian, and then I go perform comedy. So, the comedy I do reflects the beliefs
Mm-hmm.
of a Christian without maybe preaching to the audience, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, got you. So I wasn't sure. So and I'm sure there are plenty of Christians in Australia. I'm not suggesting that we're completely atheists. And I know we have very large followings, large church groups, very sort of, I imagine, very Nashville, very Tennessee type big churches with thousands of people in them here as well. And I wanted to talk a little bit about comedy as a Christian, because I've never this is an episode in its 60s. We've done over 60 podcasts, and Christianity or religion as a theme has never been talked about. It's people make religious jokes, of course, and there's plenty of Jesus jokes out there and Muhammad jokes and so on. But how do you write material for an audience that sees itself as a Christian audience, so a church, for example? How do you find the funny? Because Chris Wainhouse said that because of his upbringing being very, very structured within the confines of the Bible, that he wasn't able to think critically. And as a consequence, he finds it very difficult to understand how someone who's very Christian could be a comedian. But I want you to explain how you find comedy in something like the Bible.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's very complex. And for sure, there's as many different types of Christian comedians as there are Christian people, as there are people. So everybody has a different degree of how they were raised and how they, received the information or rejected it, and how they incorporate that into their adult life and everything. So everybody's coming from a slightly different place. But as a comedian, for sure, we're known for making jokes, which means we're making fun of something, which it sounds anti-Christian to make fun of things. But
that's what I'm thinking, Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the general misconception is we just have to go up there and say polite things about everybody. But the people who study the Bible and know Christians to any degree know that Christians are very incomplete, broken people who are looking for a way to redeem the faults they have. So there's plenty of humor, not only looking inward, but looking at just humanity and how we've managed to screw a lot of things up and destroy a lot of beauty. And so there's plenty of targets. And, personally for me, I think I get the most response when I'm talking about my family and the relationships within the family as being a father, a husband. I talk about my parents. So I talk about being a son. So there's all those things. And really any topic out there could be approached in this form of comedy as a Christian comedian. The big difference, I think, is where your intention and I guess where your heart meets the words you're saying. So if you're really angry about something and not offering a solution in the process of the joke, and you're just pure anger, then that can get you some laughs for sure, but that may turn off a Christian audience to a degree. To whereas if you could be angry about something and you could have actually committed a lot of horrible things in your life, and through humor you can discuss how you got past that and how the Bible helped you get there. So it's a kind of a long-winded answer, but where you think there might be nowhere to go with comedy, in reality, everything is there for you. It's just having respect for your audience. And, whereas there are some comedians who, Bill Hicks was one famous comic in the States who loved walking people out of the showroom by getting under their skin and annoying them and saying things. And he took pride in that because he thought, comedy, you can say anything, but there's not to split hairs, but so some comics, their goal is to be an artist 100% and let the chips fall where they may. But if you're a performer who's made a career out of it, you have to pick a lane and drive down that lane with with your thoughts and your beliefs. So Christian comedians just have a different lane they're driving in.
Well, there's a well-known Australian comedian, Jim Jeffries, who's doing well in the US market. Could actually be the Antichrist in comparison to, imagine, a lot of comedians who work the Christian space, because he's a staunch atheist, and he uses, well, I think I'm not sure where you sit with gun control as well, but he's a gun control atheist foreigner in America, preaching, for want of a better word, his beliefs, and obviously he's got quite an audience as well. He's got his own TV show, and he kind of questions. He's always challenging, and I just bring him up, but I'm moving more to my next question, which is to do with structure. So, because we teach stand-up comedy here in Australia, and one of the structures we have is normal, twist, which you probably have something almost identical. Normal, twist, 1, 2, elephant. 1, 2, we assume, the brain assumes that the next number is going to be 3. You don't say 5 because that's not funny. You say something that's completely out of character or completely unusual. And it's that critical thinking, or seeing something from a different angle, that is what I'd like to talk to you about. How, by the way, firstly, do you have something like that in your teachings?
It's very similar and very close, even in wording. I call it either facts, false, or truth, twist.
Okay, so, that sounds exactly the same. Yeah, and so how do you, as a critical thinker, because a lot of non-Christians who, like your Jim Jeffrey fans, for example, would say, well, how can you be critical? How can you see a twist in something? Because seeing a twist means to contradict or break away from the status quo, and religion is all about status quo.
There's quite a few Christian comedians in the U.S. who definitely question the way Christians behave and point out that we're hypocrites. The fact that you acknowledge you're a Christian, you're acknowledging that you're not perfect and you have those faults. So there's plenty in there to pick from, I would say. And I'm trying to think if I have an example in my act.
I mean, because in my mind, as soon as I think about Christianity and comedy, I'm always thinking about jokes. For example, there's a couple of comedians independently that they didn't borrow each other's material, but independently in Australia, I've heard jokes that talk about Jesus through his teenage years. And of course, and I've done a fair bit of reading into the Bible. I grew up as a Protestant. I guess I would not be classified as religious now, but have done the background research, I guess, in my younger years. And they talk about his teenage years and how he doesn't have one according to the Bible. There isn't much, if not anything, about his teenage years. And so as a consequence of the comedy, they then fill in that missing piece and they create the humor in what's missing from the Bible. Now, of course, it doesn't paint Jesus in the best of light. In fact, in some ways, they use quite slanderous and derogatory terms about what he was up to during those times. And I won't go into details, but the humor is found by looking for the missing pieces, the gaps in this case.
Yeah, so I would assume, without knowing the exact joke, they're using the techniques of juxtaposition of Jesus being the savior of the world, and he's probably doing horrible things in those materials, and the contrast is what's getting the laugh there, and the slight shock value perhaps. But we have jokes as well about Jesus in his teenage years, because he would be a typical teenager. Yep. And for example, a friend of mine has a joke where, some family members are over and they're talking to Jesus and like, well, how old are you now? So you're getting pretty big. He goes, I don't know. What year is it?
Right.
So
okay.
he can like come back and be funny in the same part. And then, I've got a piece I haven't done in a while, but I talk about how God gives us Jesus as an example, and which is great, but Jesus never swore, never cussed, never did, cheated on his wife because he never had one. And here we are, we're all married, and, we can't be as close to, or as much like Jesus as we want to, because we don't have a roadmap for that, because Jesus was never married. So, it's almost like God gave us the entire Bible and an instruction manual on how to live life. But the part about marriage is a little, Jesus didn't have to go through that. So,
Yeah.
That's the burden that we carry that he didn't.
Yeah, yeah.
If you will.
Well, already my brain's starting to think, and I'm going to go to hell for thinking it. But I'm thinking about maybe he did have a wife, but she was over in Iran or something, or the region at the time, and he had a little bit of a secret affair going on. But anyway, so I don't want to go there because again, that would be unchristian of me to go there. But that's my brain's kind of filling in these parts, and I just wonder if that's a limitation for a Christian comedian, in that they part of their brain goes, oh, that would be funny, but I can't say it.
Oh, sure. I mean, there's definitely things that pop in your mind, and you're like, oh, it's funny for sure, but is it, for me, if it's funny, that's one thing. If it crosses over into blasphemy, that's where the Christian comedian, I've got to pull back and say that was just not a pure thought, even though it was a comedic thought. And as a comedian and a Christian, I wrestle, all the time with ideas that pop in my head. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I'm a comedian because I know that was funny, but I'm a Christian because I know it wasn't.
Yeah, right. Because one of the things that we teach at the School of Hard Not Knocks is about taboos, and really how there isn't a taboo. Depends, and when we're talking taboos, we're talking much worse than saying nasty words about Christian or Christ and so on. We're talking about topics of rape and murder and pedophilia, and I'm not suggesting you're advocating it. In no way am I advocating any of these taboos, but the topic is able to be brought to the forefront. What do you do in terms of taboos? Do you set boundaries and say, no, we do not talk about these in comedy, or are you a bit more flexible?
Well, I think it just comes out of respect for your audience and each individual comic's belief system, whether a believer or not. But you always, my school of teaching is that you're there to entertain the audience. That's what you're being paid to do. Mm-hmm. And I want my students to go out and make a career out of it. So each individual audience will be a little bit different. And so I know some students of mine go out and they've got kind of a late night show they'll do for the clubs.
Right.
And they're able to clean it up and do it for corporate audiences as well. So, topics, definitely in a corporate setting. And when I say that, I do a lot of events for, companies that are having their annual event or their meeting, and they want to lighten things up after dinner, and they bring a comic out. For most comedians, they totally despise that kind of comedy, and they hate it, and because there are too many restrictions and limitations. But again, I find the challenge in creating a show that works, that I enjoy doing in that. But I just know going up, I'm going to not talk about a considerable list of things, but that's okay, because I found comedy in a lot of different places.
Right. Understand. I'm going to throw... yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, in a way, I think everybody can do whatever they want to do. And for me, it's a benefit that a lot of people do talk about, taboo topics in their comedy, because it leaves not as many comics who go the other route, which creates more opportunities for us. So there's room for everybody. And in fact, I was trying to... And I want to work through this concept with you here, because I thought about this afternoon, is the different styles of comedy and different topics. If we looked at it as radio waves, like a bandwidth, the AM FM dial can have a variety of stations, because we're all operating on a slightly different bandwidth, but there's room for all of it there. And multiple personalities on each station with each type. So, for everything a comic would think to say, there's an audience somewhere that will receive it.
Gotcha. So you got your PBS and your Fox News, very different wavelengths.
Absolutely. And you've got your jazz and rock and roll and all that. You've got your, so there's whatever message you have, there's probably an audience for it. And if there's not, then you got to dig a little deeper somewhere.
Oh, that makes sense. Well, it's a good reminder to Aussie comedians who are deciding to get on a aeroplane and head over. But perhaps the Central Time Zone. That's where you are. That's Nashville's in Central Time. That's what other cities are in there? So you've got Texas, Chicago,
Texas, all of Texas. Louisiana.
And they're probably a bit more conservative, perhaps, with their religious beliefs. So would that be a fair call compared to, say, your New York and your LA on each coast?
Yeah, New York is pretty anti-Christian. Los Angeles is a little bit more do whatever you want to do. Texas is very conservative. Tennessee's pretty conservative. So it's all around.
Right.
But typically in the United States, they call it a Bible Belt, and it kind of goes right across the middle of the country.
Oh, very good. Well, we used to have, we still have a state. We have a city called Adelaide in South Australia, which is a state, South Australia. Not very creative, mind you, but still a state. And Adelaide was known as the city of churches for many years. I think the older generation still refer to it. Many of those churches are now apartment complexes or nightclubs. So things have certainly changed. But that would be our Bible Belt once upon a time. But things have changed somewhat. Well, Rik, thank you very much for shedding some light on, a big question I had, which was about Christian comedy and how you find the humour. And obviously, it is all about the audience. If you've got an audience that likes to hear Christian comedy, then perfect. You need to appeal to them. If someone wants to book you, someone's listening to this podcast and they're thinking, I run a really big church here in Australia, I'd fly Rik over. I think he's the perfect person to put some comedy into our fellowship. How does someone get in contact with you?
Well, if you go to rikroberts.com, and if you spell it RIKROBERTS.com, you can find out more about me. And the School of Laughs is schooloflaughs.com, and laughs is spelled correctly, not the way it usually is in the comedy club scene.
Oh, LAFFS or something, but is that what they do?
Yeah.
Right, but this is laughs as in the good old British spelling, LAUGHS.
That's right.
Fantastic. And if you are an American, or you're listening to this, do you do the course only in Nashville, or do you travel with the School of Laughs course?
I teach it here. I have a series of courses, and I teach each course about 3 times throughout the year locally, but I have an online class that is available 24/7, and people can jump on and start, anytime they want. And I've got students in 23 different countries taking that class. Oh, that's
fantastic. Fantastic. So we'll make sure that there is a link to theschooloflaughs.com in the show notes. And obviously you can just do a Google search as well to find Rik Roberts. Rik, fantastic. Thank you very much for your time. Really enjoyed this conversation.
Maury, it's been a lot of fun, and I look forward to checking out more of your episodes of your podcast. I've enjoyed the ones I've heard so far.
Fantastic.